Hi, my name is Troy Jordan. I'm the author of Movable Guitar, available on Amazon.com. And this lesson is going to focus on scales, a couple scales in particular. First of all, the major scale, and then secondly, the blues scale. I'll show some different examples and ways to connect the scales together across the guitar so that you can have more fluency and the ability to do things a little bit more naturally the way you want to do them. All right, let's get started. First thing I'm going to show you is just some basic fingerings for major scales. The one I find the easiest, starting with the root on the 6th string, which is your lowest string of the guitar. I usually like to start with my middle finger, my second finger. So when I refer to fingers, I'll be referring to as the pointing finger as finger 1, middle finger is finger 2, ring finger is finger 3, and the pinky is finger 4, just to help talk the same language. I'm going to start on a G, which is your first dot, 3rd fret of the guitar. I'm going to start on the string 6, and then starting with that, I'm going to strum the 6th string, and then with my pinky, I'll play on the 2nd dot. So we have G, A, and then I'm going to be ready to go to the next string with my next finger. Now the idea here is that I'm laying this out so I can do all of my playing as I move from string to string with these 4 fingers in this position. And it's a little bit tougher to do this when you get to the end of the neck of the guitar, but as you move up, it gets easier up to the point when, depending on the size of your fingers, when there's some point up here where, like, my fingers fit nicely up to this point, but when I get up here, the distance between each fret gets smaller and smaller. So some of these techniques work nicely, like in certain ranges of the guitar, but not necessarily all over. So this one works fairly nice you can play all the way down here, but you have to stretch your hand a little bit. So if someone with maybe smaller hands or not quite the dexterity, they may have challenges with that. So I'll show you starting on G. Okay, so that's a basic G scale. And what as in the book, I recommend when you're practicing scales, do a couple different patterns. So maybe play it just straight like I did going up, and then maybe coming back down the scale. Maybe you can do it as a triplets. Here's an example of that. And you'll notice that I went up to 1 scale degree higher than I went up to what you might call the 9th in order to create that triplet feel. Let me do that again for you, a little bit slower. So that's the top of the scale, and then I went on up to. The reason I did that was so that everything would work out. The math would work out, so triplets would take me down to the bottom of the scale again. Funny how sometimes when you overthink things, they don't go as well. And that does remind me, I would encourage you, as you practice your scales, work toward getting to the point where you're able to work from touch without looking at your fretboard. It takes a little bit of extra effort, but so that was, first we played the G major, then I played A major. And the way that I'm playing these, the first note I play is going to be with my middle finger, and it's the root of the scale. The root is simply the bottom note of the scale. It's the note that the scale is based on. In a major scale, G, that's the root note, the first degree of the scale for a G major scale. And I played an A scale. Now I'm going to go up to a B flat. Now this is, I'm going to start with the note that's between the 2nd and 3rd dot on the guitar. So this is fret 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that'll be the note B flat on the lowest E string, which is string 6. So this is a B flat major scale. Okay, so that was the B flat major scale. Now let's take a look at the C major scale, which is going up 2 more frets. So this is, if you count the dots, the first dot, second dot, third dot, fourth dot, it's the space between the third and fourth dot on the low E string. Okay, so those are some examples. I won't go through all the scales, but you probably noticed that the pattern was exactly the same. And so that's the advantage of following this kind of movable guitar concept. There are other ways of playing major scales there in the middle. And this was doing another A scale, but this is a different configuration because we kind of have to do these leaps like this. And then we go into a kind of a regular pattern. And then here we have to stretch back. It's a little bit harder to make those stretches happen smoothly. Whereas that first scale, the first pattern I showed you, it's just a little bit easier under the fingers. All right, well, so those are some examples of playing major scales. And major scales, they're kind of the foundation for a lot of our playing. But another scale that's really popular that you'll want to know is the blues scale. And the major scale, it's based on, a spacing of, you're going to go up a step, another step, and then a half step, then a step, step. So the intervals on the major scale, those are the intervals, and I'll put that up on the screen for you to see. But for the blues scale, it's a different set of intervals. So just for an example, I'll play a B flat blues. So we've got G, A, B flat. So this one's going to start on the root on the low E string for the first note. And then we're going to follow that with, on the next string, so going from B flat, B flat to D flat. So you should see the fingering for this on the screen. All right, we'll do that in the key of G. Now the key of A. This time I'm going to do it with triplet pattern. Okay, and then one thing I like to do when I practice is kind of switch the patterns up as I go. So like I might play, as I move up through the scales, I might play one key, such as this one, I might do it just like real straight. when I get to the next key, maybe I'll do it swing. And then maybe triplets. And then maybe I'll focus on slowing down a little bit, but making it more legato. Or maybe even slower and even more legato. And then try to speed it up and still keep it legato. Okay, you may have noticed there was something I did earlier that is kind of a useful trick for like blues, and that's when you play, you can get two notes out of each pluck of the pick, usually as you move upward. So you notice that. And they can bend. Yeah, so there's some examples of some blues. So basing on that fundamental, so let's go to look at like G. So this is a G scale. So that's a blues scale, but in this case the root of G is actually on the second string, on the A string. And you'll notice there's a pattern you'll see emerge. So in this case I'm starting on the A string. I'm starting with a G. My root is different than it would be if I was on the E string. On the E string my root would be either here or all the way up here. That's where my G would be. But on the A string my root is a little bit more convenient. Like if I want to play in this upper range, get a little bit better sonority for, maybe playing a blues solo or something, then by starting in this blues configuration, which is different than the first I showed you, you start off very similar. So when I started on the E string, it was my first interval, spaced out 4 frets apart. 1, 2, 3, 4 is what I mean by that. So a little bit of a challenge to move fast down here in this range because the frets are far apart. But if I move to the next string and then come up here, now I can move a lot faster. And on the chapter about blue note bending, the advantage here too, this part of the guitar in the middle is much, much better for doing bending notes, as opposed to down here. If I play that same pattern, I can still bend, but I'm starting to run into the tension. The closer I get to the end, the tension builds up on these strings because it's closer to the end point. So from a leverage standpoint, the strings here in the middle can be bent a lot more at this point than they can up here or down here. And so think strategically about that. The other thing too is, like, if you are doing bending notes, be careful. Especially if you're on your thin strings, your 2 highest strings, because if you're doing that with just one finger and you push really hard, I've actually cut my finger right open before I developed really heavy calluses. It probably wouldn't happen now. It'd probably just shave off like the top layer of skin. But you should be really careful when doing that. And one trick to help that is if you bend using like 3 fingers, but you're putting the pressure on one of those 3, then it's going to spread that resistance out over multiple fingers. So depending on the flexibility and which string you're using, like on this string, it's probably a little bit less of a cutting issue. It's not as likely to cut me, so I might be able to get by just using 2 fingers. And then on the thicker strings, it's less of an issue. but it is definitely easier to bend up in this range than it is way out here. So that's kind of a little bit out of order in the lesson, but that gives you a preview. We'll have another lesson that's dedicated to that type of thing. But back to the concept, the first blues scale I showed you, it's the same notes. These are all just blues scales. Earlier I showed you a configuration starting with the first finger. Another concept is extending blues across the neck of the guitar. So as an example, I'm going to start with the key of A, and here I'm going to play the scale that I showed you earlier. So that's a blues scale using that pattern that I showed you earlier. I could extend upward. Bring me back to that A. I could also extend to the left, or to my left, your right. Now I'm going to go down. Ending back at that A again. I hope you enjoyed that lesson and got something good out of it. Hopefully that will help you in your process of growing as a guitarist. You know, as you practice your major scales and your blues scales, there's other scales to learn, such as minor scales. We don't want to forget those. There's also some basic foundational scales like pentatonic scales that make up the blues scales. Minor pentatonic scale in particular is the one we kind of focused on today with a tritone thrown in there, and that's the fundamental of what a blues scale is. So I hope you're enjoying this so far. If you want to read about this and get some diagrams and some worksheets and things that you can use and something you can lay out on your table in front of you instead of looking at a computer all the time, go to Amazon.com and buy Movable Guitar. I hope you enjoy it. Look forward to getting your feedback and finding out what I could do to make it better. I've got a website that I've created called MovableGuitar.com, where you can go find information, additions to the book that may be coming in the future, some examples like these videos, but also if I've made a mistake somewhere in the book, I'll call that out there as well. So God bless you. Have a good day.